At 99 years old, Mel Brooks has earned the rare privilege of reflection without pretense. After nearly a century of living, laughing, and shaping American comedy, he no longer feels the need to soften the truth for comfort or optics. Brooks has always believed comedy is built on honesty, even when that honesty is uncomfortable. In recent conversations, he has spoken more openly about the creative clashes that shaped his career, not as grudges, but as lessons learned over decades in Hollywood. These reflections are not attacks, but acknowledgements that even brilliance can collide when personalities, timing, and artistic philosophy don't align. Brooks never judged talent alone. He judged compatibility. His sets were ecosystems built on rhythm, trust, and shared joy. When those elements cracked, no amount of fame or genius could repair them. These stories are less about resentment and more about boundaries, revealing how Brooks protected his creative process while navigating one of the most demanding industries in the world. Jerry Lewis and the weight of competing genius. Mel Brooks often described Jerry Lewis with a mix of admiration and exhaustion. Lewis was undeniably brilliant, a master of physical comedy whose influence reshaped American humor. But brilliance, Brooks believed, came with responsibility. Their paths nearly crossed in the mid-1980s when Lewis was briefly suggested for a supporting role in Life Stinks, a satirical film about wealth and homelessness. Brooks declined immediately, not out of spite, but foresight. Lewis was known for dominating creative spaces, rewriting scenes mid-performance, and challenging directors at every turn. Brooks valued controlled chaos, not combat. A single dinner between them confirmed his instincts. Lewis spoke endlessly, consumed by ideas, barely leaving room for dialogue. Brooks listened politely, then quietly exited, knowing collaboration would never work. Gene Wilder and the silence that followed magic. No creative relationship meant more to Mel Brooks than his bond with Gene Wilder. Together, they reshaped comedy with Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, blending absurdity with emotional sincerity. Wilder brought vulnerability to Brooks's wild imagination, grounding chaos in humanity. But after Young Frankenstein, something shifted. Wilder wanted Brooks to produce and guide a film he planned to direct himself, the adventure of Sherlock Holmes's smarter brother. Brooks declined, believing Wilder wasn't yet ready for directing. The decision wasn't meant as rejection, but protection. Wilder heard it differently. What followed wasn't conflict, but distance. The warmth faded, replaced by silence. They didn't argue publicly or trade insults. They simply stopped creating together. When they met years later, there was kindness, but no reunion. Chevy Chase and the absence of ensemble spirit. Chevy Chase's name appeared repeatedly in studio conversations about Mel Brooks films during the 1980s. He was successful, recognizable, and undeniably funny. But Brooks consistently declined. His reason was simple and deeply personal. Comedy, to Brooks, required generosity. Chase, in his view, operated differently. He was sharp, confident, and capable of commanding a room, but often seemed detached from ensemble rhythm. Brooks believed Chase waited for moments to outshine rather than collaborate. That mindset conflicted with Brooks's philosophy, where timing mattered more than dominance. When studios suggested Chase for Spaceballs, Brooks chose Rick Moranis instead, valuing humility and musicality over star power. Brooks never publicly criticized Chase. He simply moved on. Their brief meeting confirmed the mismatch. Chase carried the aura of a solo act, while Brooks built orchestras. For Brooks, comedy wasn't about proving intelligence, but surrendering to shared absurdity. something he felt Chase was unwilling to fully do. Harvey Korman and the battle over rhythm. Harvey Korman was a comedic powerhouse, celebrated for his improvisational brilliance on The Carol Burnett Show. When he joined High Anxiety, Brooks expected sparks. What followed was friction rooted in process, not ego. Korman thrived on spontaneity, constantly reshaping characters mid-performance. Brooks, however, composed his films like music, with every pause, beat, and syllable carefully placed. Improvisation threatened that balance. Korman questioned lines, altered delivery, and pushed boundaries. Brooks resisted. Tension grew quietly, professionally, without shouting or scandal. Crew members sensed the strain, though audiences never did. On screen, Korman was flawless. Off-screen, the collaboration drained Brooks. After the film, Korman was never cast again in a Brooks project. There was no bitterness, only recognition. Brooks later said brilliance sometimes arrives with friction, and while he admired Korman deeply, the cost to creative harmony was too high to repeat. Frank Langella and two different films. When Mel Brooks began developing Dracula, Dead and Loving It, he sought a very specific tone, gothic absurdity collapsing into slapstick chaos. Frank Langella, famed for his dramatic portrayal of Dracula on Broadway, seemed perfect on paper. In reality, the fit was wrong. Langella brought gravitas, elegance, and seriousness. Brooks needed speed, looseness, and fearless silliness. Rehearsals revealed the divide. Langella delivered every line with Shakespearean weight, resisting comedic collapse. Brooks gently redirected, encouraging playfulness, but Langella remained anchored in drama. The breaking moment came when Langella asked whether the script should be mocked. Brooks realized they were making different movies. The split was respectful and quiet. Leslie Nielsen replaced Langella, bringing deadpan chaos that perfectly served Brooks's vision. There was no animosity, only clarity. Langella was brilliant, but brilliance must align with tone. Comedy, Brooks believed, demands commitment to absurdity without apology. Mel Brooks's philosophy of creative protection. Mel Brooks never viewed these experiences as failures. He saw them as boundaries. Over decades, he learned that talent alone does not create great comedy. Trust does, rhythm does, humility does. Brooks protected his sets like ecosystems, knowing one mismatched personality could drain joy from dozens of collaborators. He welcomed big personalities when they served the story, but resisted when ego overshadowed ensemble harmony. His films succeeded not because of unchecked freedom, but because of controlled play. Brooks believed laughter required safety, a space where actors could fail without fear. When that space was threatened, he stepped back, even from legends. These decisions shaped his legacy as much as his scripts. He wasn't building monuments to himself. He was building worlds where comedy could breathe. And sometimes, protecting that world meant saying no, even when the industry expected yes. Why these stories matter now. At nearly 100, Mel Brooks shares these reflections not to settle scores, but to offer perspective. Hollywood often celebrates conflict as drama, but Brooks reframes it as compatibility. Creative differences are not moral failures. They are natural collisions of vision. His honesty offers insight into how longevity is sustained, not by pleasing everyone, but by staying aligned with one's values. Brooks never chased approval. He chased joy. These stories reveal a man who valued laughter as a shared act, not a competitive sport. By speaking now, Brooks isn't diminishing anyone's legacy, including his own. He's humanizing it. Even geniuses disagree. Even icons misalign. What matters is recognizing when to step away with grace. That wisdom, earned over nearly a century, is perhaps his final gift to the art of comedy. The quiet strength behind the laughter. What defines Mel Brooks isn't the conflicts he avoided, but the environments he created. His films endure because they feel alive, collaborative, and fearless. That atmosphere didn't happen by accident. It was protected. Brooks understood that comedy, at its core, is vulnerable. It requires trust, surrender, and collective rhythm. When those elements faltered, he chose preservation over compromise. That choice may have closed doors, but it opened timeless laughter. The actors who thrived under Brooks weren't the loudest or most dominant. They were the ones who listened, adapted, and played. In that sense, Brooks wasn't difficult. He was disciplined. And discipline, paradoxically, is what allowed his chaos to soar. These reflections remind us that behind every great laugh is 1,000 invisible decisions made to protect joy. A legacy bigger than any conflict. Mel Brooks's legacy isn't defined by who he didn't work with, but by what he built. His films remain cultural landmarks, studied, quoted, and loved across generations. At 99, his honesty feels less like confession and more like closure. He speaks not with bitterness, but clarity. The industry may remember controversies, but Brooks remembers laughter. He remembers moments when everything clicked, when absurdity and sincerity merged into something unforgettable. Those moments were worth protecting, even at the cost of missed collaborations. In the end, Brooks proves that longevity isn't about appeasing every voice. It's about knowing which voices belong in your song. And after nearly a century, Mel Brooks has earned the right to sing that truth out loud.